Thank you. You have the floor.
Much, Catherine. So the name is Welthungerhilfe with a nice American accent or German. I'm going to talk about anticipatory humanitarian action. And the full title, you see it here, but I think what is most important is actually at the very end. We are talking here about preserving human dignity, as Cardinal Torkson yesterday said very clearly, and that is what it's all about. So when we started to talk about anticipatory humanitarian action, I think it's important to also look at the humanitarian paradigm shift, which is really we need a humanitarian paradigm shift to start from reacting to an actual crisis to acting ahead of a certain crisis. And we need to drive that paradigm shift, and this is what Welthungerhilfe has been doing in the last couple of years, alongside with many others. I think it's something important to work in partners with. I brought you this part to look at what does actually humanitarian paradigm shift mean, and is anticipatory action just another buzzword? I mean, we've touched upon it in the last 2 days very much. I think the most important one is that instead of waiting for loss and damage to happen and respond with emergency aid, it's important also to build up in resilience, to have more resilience, more anticipatory action, early warning and early action, but also more preparedness. But the thing is that anticipatory humanitarian action really means to anticipate needs and hopefully to avoid that lives are lost or that livelihoods are lost. So we want to avoid there the actual humanitarian need. I hesitated long to give you this definition of anticipatory humanitarian action in a slide, but I will do it because I think it really shows. Sorry, okay. Now the definition is acting ahead of predicted hazards to prevent or reduce acute humanitarian impacts before they fully unfold, what I said just before. But this, and now we are coming to the most important point, requires pre-agreed plans that identified partners and activities, reliable early warning information, and pre-agreed financing that is released predictably and rapidly when an agreed trigger point is reached. So this definition has all the elements that anticipatory humanitarian action entails, and I think it summarizes nicely what we've talked yesterday about different sets of data. So this is where it all comes together. Here we have it in a little bit easy way of looking at it. So we work with preparedness and DRR. We need this early warning, which triggers actually the early action. And this gives us in the green slide really a window of opportunity to act and to prevent losses. And this is where I would like to show you the example of Madagascar, where Welthungerhilfe WHH has piloted this in partnership with many other agencies. So in Madagascar, we actually only worked on the hazard of drought. So this is a very specific example, which I think then shows very clearly how the mechanism works and how this could maybe also be scaled up to different type of hazard and different type of settings. So at the very beginning, there's is scientific and earth observation systems that monitor the drought. So in this particular case, it is the water requirement satisfaction index that is monitored very closely. And when then a critical threshold is crossed, warning is issued and a trigger is actually made. And now the very critical point, this trigger is releasing pre-agreed funds for proactive aid measures. So proactive aid measures are taken even before the negative effect of the drought is happening. So this prevents then damages and losses, or they can be minimized. So this is the entire mechanism. And I'm coming to the next slide, which is a normal season in Madagascar. Here, the reference crop is maize. So it depends really also in which regions, which reference crop is made. For instance, in the north of Madagascar, this would be rice. In the south of Madagascar, it is maize. So I'm not an agronomist, so I'll not go into all the details, but it gives you, I think, a good idea. You see the year, it starts from seeding and it goes up until May when the harvest is made. Compared to this, we see an abnormal season, so where due to the missing rainfall, the harvest, the seeding already is delayed, and then the harvest is negative. And this agreed. Now, here comes in the agreed trigger. So you see that already in the seeding period, based on the water requirement satisfaction index, if this is less than 50, that is an agreed trigger, then the technical trigger is evolved. So the important thing is also that it is a technical trigger. So it is not a political decision whether the trigger is activated, but it's activated based on data and science. And I think this is why this is a good example also for this round, because we can see like humanitarian aid and practical programming is coming and working closely together with science where we need to cooperate. So this gives us this already said window of opportunity for early action implementation to actually avoid that people are coming into the hunger season. So as I said, once the trigger is activated, in this particular case, Welthungerhilfe actually started to issue cash grants for the upcoming six months. What is important here is that it doesn't necessarily has to be a cash intervention. Cash has been the right intervention, and it was discussed also this morning in this particular case, because the cash intervention was only for the most vulnerable people, which was something that was defined together with the community. So who would be the most needy in such a situation? And it was decided also that markets are working, so cash is a good option. We also monitor, you see that at the baseline, we do in the green, sorry, we start with a baseline monitor throughout, and then do an end line to also really measure whether the cash distribution had the intended impact. I put you here 2 pictures of Sandrine, because she was one of the people participating in the program. And Claudia, this morning, you were outlining and telling what can happen to people if they are food insecure. And all of this was avoided in the case of Sandrine. She was somebody who is washing clothes for a living, is alone, has 2 children, and thanks to this cash transfer, she was really able to keep her 2 children in school during that difficult drought period. And I think it's always important when we talk about these technical mechanisms to bring it back to the human beings that we are talking about. That's why I put here the pictures of Sandrine. Of course, nothing comes with challenges. So I would like also to put the challenges here in this round. First and foremost, we think it's very important to advocate and promote a common understanding of anticipatory humanitarian action. As many times, and we all know that new buzzwords are coming and going, and when the buzzword is there attached to funding, we try to put also other type of actions underneath this umbrella. So we really stick to the definition that I brought on the one hand, that it needs to be really based on a pre-agreed technical trigger, pre-agreed funding, and that we act before the disaster happens, and that we do not include just imminent emergency aid like we have done in the past. The second one, it's very important to assure open source data and open access to risk models. So this we are talking about humanitarian programming. It's not a business, and data is not a business. And I think to keep data open source and also the underlying risk models in an open source way is very important for us. I already said, and I think this is the right way to underline it again, when we should act beyond economic reasoning. The discourse has a little bit been, anticipatory action is good because we can save costs, and we try to calculate. I also, preparing this session, I also ask, okay, how much cost can be saved? But a life cannot be put in cost. And I think that's very, very important to underline. And I think the setting we are in, and also Cardinal, your words yesterday, really fit into this reflection. I think it's key. Fourth, understand and account to people and communities at risk. We've had the discussion. It's a very technical issue we are talking about. We need triggers and models, etc. But one of the key success factors is that the discussion doesn't remain on a technical scientific level, but we try to link it to the people we work with. So all that we have been doing in Madagascar was also done in communication and collaboration with the communities at hand. And this makes it also a bit difficult for the scaling process because it's not one size fits all. Yeah, yesterday, Jeannie asked me whether we always do cash intervention. So if anticipatory action is always linked to cash, it isn't. It's something that we need to discuss and analyze based on the situation and really with the communities that are at risk. So I think this is key, and this is where also the aspect of localization comes in and is a key success factor. Last but not least, go beyond humanitarian action. The anticipatory humanitarian action has come, per definition, a little bit out of the humanitarian sector, but I think it's something that we need to interlink with other sectors, with those working on climate, those working on development, all of us. And I think also this fora shows closely how practitioners, science, policymakers comes together, also from different type of sectors. So that's something I think is a basis if we want to scale up and make this humanitarian paradigm shift true. So we can conclude that anticipatory humanitarian action saves life, it avoids suffering and reduces humanitarian need, and it's more effective also and efficient than the traditional humanitarian aid. We feel that this is really now a momentum because it has been on the top of the agenda also, for instance, of the G7, of the UN. You have also talked about it, Valerie, WFP. So I think it's really the momentum to drive it forward, and we need, and I think that became clear yesterday from the session on the data, we need also a collaboration on science. And I'm closing, and I borrowed this from my colleague, I have to say, don't wait, anticipate. Thank you.